When a humble woman spots a soldier in desperate danger, she risks her own life to drag him to safety. Exhausted, she collapses, unconscious. But when she wakes, she is stunned to see not just the man she saved, but an entire battalion standing in salute, honoring her courage in a way she never imagined. This is a story of bravery, sacrifice, and how one act of kindness can change the lives of many. The town of Brookhaven was not known for extraordinary events. It was a quiet, modest community where everyone knew one another by name, and life unfolded in gentle rhythms. Among its people lived Clara Dawson, a woman who blended into the backdrop of daily life in ways that often went unnoticed. At first glance, she was just another resident, walking to the market in the mornings, chatting politely with neighbors, working her shifts at the local diner. She had no wealth, no rank, no worldly power. Yet, those who truly knew her understood that Clara possessed something far rarer than fame or fortune: a heart of unwavering compassion. Clara's life had never been easy. She was in her late 30s, and life had carved resilience into her character. Her husband had died unexpectedly years ago, leaving her to raise her young son, Ethan, alone. She worked double shifts at the diner, never complained, and poured her remaining time into raising Ethan with dignity and strength. "We may not have much," she would often tell him with a gentle smile, "but we always have enough to share." And she lived those words every day. The people of Brookhaven admired her, though she never sought admiration. If an elderly neighbor needed groceries, Clara was there with a warm casserole and a cheerful laugh. If someone's child scraped a knee at the park, she was the one pulling tissues from her bag, cleaning wounds with the same patience she gave Ethan. Her life was not glamorous, but it was rich in kindness. Her connection to the military community in town was indirect, but real. Brookhaven bordered a training ground where young soldiers often passed through. Clara had grown up seeing them in their uniforms, their posture straight, their eyes sharp with determination. She admired them deeply, but she had never considered herself brave in the same way. To her, bravery was about holding her family together, enduring sleepless nights to put food on the table, and facing each day with a steady heart. She believed herself to be ordinary. One of Clara's habits was volunteering at the community center every Sunday afternoon. The center organized care packages for deployed soldiers, boxers filled with snacks, handwritten notes and tokens from home. Clara had been part of the effort for years, and her letters were known to be especially heartfelt. She always reminded the soldiers that they were thought of, prayed for, and missed. Some even wrote back, thanking her for words that had reached them in the loneliest corners of foreign lands. Still, Clara never thought of herself as doing anything extraordinary. She simply believed kindness was her duty as a human being. Ethan, now 13, often teased her gently. "Mom, you're too soft. You help everybody." Clara would laugh, brushing back his unruly brown hair. One day, Ethan, she would reply, "You'll see that being soft doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes it takes more strength to be kind than anything else." Despite her sacrifices, Clara never let bitterness seep into her spirit. She carried herself with quiet dignity, even in struggle. Some nights, after Ethan was asleep, she would sit by the window, looking out at the distant lights of the military base. She often thought of the young men and women training there, preparing for challenges she could hardly imagine. She admired their courage but could never picture herself as part of their world. "I am just Clara," she would murmur to herself. An ordinary woman living an ordinary life, but there was something about Clara that people instinctively noticed. Her eyes, a warm hazel, always carried sincerity. Her voice, calm and steady, had a way of soothing. Even the toughest customers at the diner softened when she approached their tables. The soldiers who came in from the base often requested her section, charmed not just by her smile but by her genuine interest in their well-being. She would ask how training was going, if their families were doing well, if they were eating enough. In her presence, people felt seen, and yet Clara had her struggles. Bills piled up more quickly than she could pay them. Ethan's growing needs, new clothes, school supplies, even his dream of joining the school band, stretched her finances thin. There were nights she went without dinner to make sure he had enough. But Clara never let Ethan feel the weight of those sacrifices. She reminded him, instead of the blessings they still had, a roof over their heads, food on the table, and love in abundance. What no one, not even Clara herself, realized was that all these small acts of resilience, compassion, and quiet strength had been preparing her for something greater. Her life had taught her to act when others hesitated, to endure when others gave up, and to care when it was easiest to turn away. She did not see herself as a hero. She thought of herself as a mother, a neighbor, a waitress, a volunteer. She believed her courage was no different from anyone else's. But fate has a way of testing people in ways they never expect. And it was about to place Clara in a moment that would redefine her forever. Because while soldiers trained on the base nearby, warily preparing for dangers on foreign soil, destiny was quietly shaping an encounter that would bring one of them face to face with Clara. And in that moment, her ordinary life would collide with extraordinary circumstances. She had no way of knowing that within days, she would be the one running toward chaos when others froze. The one who would summon strengths she never imagined she possessed. And the one who would wake not in obscurity but to the sight of an entire battalion saluting her bravery. But for now, Clara remained in her small house, sipping her late-night tea, her son asleep upstairs, and her heart steady as ever. She was, in her own eyes, just another ordinary woman. Yet beneath the surface, she was a flame waiting to be tested. A flame that, when the time came, would burn bright enough to change lives. It was an unusually hot afternoon in Brookhaven. The kind of day when the sun pressed heavily on the streets and the air shimmered above the asphalt. Clara had just finished her morning shift at the diner and was driving home, along the narrow county road that bordered the military training grounds. Ethan was at school, and she hummed quietly to herself, windows cracked to let in the faint breeze. The road was quiet, flanked by stretches of farmland and clusters of oak trees. She slowed near a sharp bend, a place she always drove carefully. On the other side of the bend, soldiers often trained on rugged terrain. Trucks and armored vehicles sometimes rolled across the dirt roads nearby, their rumble echoing in the air. Clara had grown used to it. She respected it. To her, it was a reminder of lives lived in service. But on that day, as she turned the corner, she saw something that made her heart seize in her chest. A military transport vehicle, one of the smaller trucks, had veered off the dirt road and crashed against a ditch. The front was crumpled, smoke curled upward, and the acrid smell of fuel filled the air. Several soldiers were already scrambling, shouting orders, but Clara's eyes fixed on one figure. A young soldier lay half-trapped near the wreck, his leg pinned under twisted metal. His helmet was gone, his face pale, streaked with dirt and blood. Panic seemed to ripple through the scene. A few soldiers tried to approach, but the vehicle hissed dangerously, threatening to catch fire at any moment. Someone shouted for backup. Others waved for people to stay back. But the soldier on the ground groaned in pain, his hand reaching feebly toward the sky, toward anyone who would come. Clara's heart raced. For a second, she sat frozen in her car, torn between fear and instinct. She was no firefighter, no medic, no soldier. Just Clara Dawson, waitress and mother. Her hands trembled against the steering wheel as the voice in her head whispered, "Stay back. Someone else will help." "It is too dangerous," but another voice, stronger, came from somewhere deeper inside her. What if it were Ethan lying there? What if no one else stepped forward? Would you forgive yourself for doing nothing? Her decision came in a single breath. Clara threw her car into park, pushed open the door, and sprinted toward the wreck. "Ma'am, stay back." A soldier barked, trying to wave her away. It's not safe. But Clara's momentum didn't falter. "He's still breathing," she shouted, pointing at the trapped soldier. "You cannot leave him there." She dropped to her knees beside the injured man. He was young, no older than 20. His lips trembled, his chest rose in shallow, ragged breaths. His eyes flickered open, and in them Clara saw fear, raw and human. It wasn't the fearless gaze of a soldier in uniform. It was the pleading look of a boy who didn't want to die. "It's all right," she whispered, her voice steady even though her heart thundered. "You're not alone. I'm here. I'll get you out." The metal pinning his leg was wedged tightly. Clara pressed her shoulder against it, gritting her teeth, pushing with every ounce of strength she had. Pain shot through her muscles, sweat rolled down her temples, and still it didn't budge. A soldier knelt beside her, shaking his head. "It's no use without tools. We're waiting on extraction." By then, Clara snapped, refusing to look away from the young man's face. He could be gone. She looked around frantically. A metal rod lay nearby, part of the vehicle's broken frame. Without thinking, Clara seized it, wedging it under the twisted piece of wreckage. She leaned with her full weight, straining until her arms quivered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of protest, the metal shifted just enough. "Pull him," she gasped. The other soldier grabbed the injured man under the arms and dragged him clear. Clara fell back, gasping for breath, her vision swimming, but relief surged through her when she saw the boy pulled free. His leg was mangled, his uniform torn, but he was alive. The soldiers cheered briefly, voices sharp with urgency, but the sound was drowned out by a new, horrifying noise, the hiss of fuel catching flame. The wreck burst into fire behind them, heat searing the air. Clara shielded the soldier with her body as embers sprayed outward. "We have to move him," She shouted again, her voice hoarse. Together, she and 2 soldiers lifted the young man and staggered towards safety. Every step felt like a mile. Clara's lungs burned, her arms screamed with effort, but she did not let go. Not when the smoke stung her eyes, not when the ground trembled beneath her from the force of the fire. Not even when her body begged her to stop. Finally, they reached the clear edge of the training field, where medics rushed forward with a stretcher. The soldier was placed gently on it, oxygen mask pressed to his face. Clara sagged to her knees, coughing violently, tears streaming down her soot-streaked face. The young man's hand reached toward her, weak but insistent. She clasped it in both of hers, pressing it to her chest. "You're safe now," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're going to be all right." He tried to speak, his words faint. "Thank you." Clara smiled through her tears, but her vision blurred. The world around her seemed to spin, sounds fading into distant echoes, shouts, boots pounding, the crackle of fire. She swayed forward, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. And then darkness claimed her, when Clara collapsed. Soldiers immediately gathered around her. "Get her to the medics," someone ordered. Rough but careful hands lifted her, laying her on another stretcher. Oxygen was placed over her face, but she didn't stir. To the soldiers, she looked like one of them, covered in dirt and smoke, her clothing torn, her arms marked with bruises. Some of the young recruits whispered in awe. "She's just a civilian," one said quietly. "But she went in when we hesitated." The commanding officer, his voice gravelly with both respect and guilt, answered firmly, "Courage doesn't wear a uniform. Remember that." And so Clara Dawson, the woman who always thought of herself as ordinary, lay unconscious, carried away from the chaos she had defied. She had no idea that her act of instinctive courage had been witnessed by more than just a handful of soldiers. Word was already spreading. A simple woman had done what few dared to do, and the entire battalion was preparing to honor her in a way she could never have imagined. The world faded from Clara Dawson's sight the moment her knees buckled beneath her. She remembered the young soldier's faint gratitude, the weight of his hand in hers, and then nothing. A heavy silence swallowed her consciousness, wrapping her in an abyss where time seemed suspended to the soldiers surrounding her. However, Clara's collapse was far from silence. Chaos erupted in sharp commands and hurried movements. Medics rushed to her side, checking her pulse, lifting her carefully onto a stretcher. Her face was pale, streaked with soot, her chest rising faintly with shallow breaths. "She's alive," one of the medics barked, pressing an oxygen mask over her mouth and nose. "We need fluids, now." As they worked, the young soldier she had saved lay only feet away on another stretcher, his leg bandaged, 4 tubes connected to his arm. His voice was faint but insistent. Where is she?" "She's here," another soldier reassured him, glancing toward Clara. "She saved your life, son. Don't worry about her now." But he did worry. His eyes, though heavy with pain and sedatives, searched for her desperately until they found her still form. A tear slipped down his soot-streaked cheek. She didn't have to," he whispered. His words dissolved into silence as exhaustion overtook him. Clara, deep in unconsciousness, drifted into the kind of dream that was less dream and more memory. In the darkness, she saw Ethan as a small boy again, clinging to her hand as they crossed the street. She saw herself serving plates at the diner, tired but smiling. She saw her late husband's face, blurred by time, telling her once more, "You're stronger than you know, Clara." And beneath all of it, a voice not from her past, but from somewhere deeper echoed, "This is what strength looks like. Not turning away. Not letting fear win." Even in her state of collapse, her spirit fought to hold on to that truth. Hours passed before Clara stirred. She woke not to the flames or the chaos of the accident's site, but to the steady hum of a generator and the antiseptic smell of a military field hospital tent. Her head throbbed, her limbs ached, and every breath was an effort. Blinking against the harsh white light, she struggled to orient herself. "Easy, ma'am," a calm voice said beside her. She turned her head slightly to see a medic, young but steady, watching her closely. "You're safe. You're in the field infirmary. What happened?" Clara's voice was hoarse, barely audible. "You collapsed after pulling a soldier out of the wreck," the medic explained, his tone respectful. "You pushed yourself too far. Your body just shut down." Clara closed her eyes briefly, the memory flooding back in pieces. The groaning metal, the soldier's pale face, the searing heat of the fire. Her chest tightened as she remembered the moment she had felt his hand in hers. "Is he?" she began, her voice breaking. "He's alive," the medic interrupted gently, "thanks to you. He's in stable condition now. You saved him." Relief washed over Clara like a wave, tears stinging her eyes. She turned her face toward the pillow, whispering a prayer of gratitude. "Thank God." Moments later, there was a commotion near the entrance of the tent. The flap pulled open, and 2 officers entered, their uniforms crisp despite the dust and smoke lingering in the air. They carried themselves with an air of authority, but their expressions were softened with something else. "Reverence **, Miss Dawson?" one of them asked. His voice was low but firm. Clara shifted uncomfortably under their gaze, instinctively shrinking into the cot. "Yes, that's me." The officer stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. "I am Colonel Harris, commanding officer of this battalion. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did today. You saved one of my men, and you risked your life doing it." Clara shook her head quickly, almost defensively. "I only did what anyone would have done. He was going to die. I couldn't just stand there." The colonel studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he said quietly, "You may think anyone would have done it. But the truth is, most did not. You ran toward danger when others froze. That is not ordinary. That is courage." Clara's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks, as she whispered, "I'm no hero." The colonel's expression softened further. "That's what every true hero says." After they left, Clara lay in silence, the weight of their words pressing on her. She had never imagined herself in this position. She was just Clara, a waitress, a mother, someone who lived on the edge of bills and long shifts. Heroes were the people in uniforms, not women like her. but fate didn't seem to care about titles or uniforms. It had placed her there, in that exact moment, with a choice, and she had acted. Still, she could not shake the unease. Would Ethan hear about this? Would people look at her differently? She dreaded the thought of being placed in a spotlight she never sought, yet outside the infirmary tent, something extraordinary was happening. Word of her actions had spread through the battalion like wildfire. The soldiers, men and women, hardened by training, discipline, and years of service, spoke of her with awe. They had seen courage in combat, but to see it in a civilian, a woman with no training, no duty to them, struck a deeper chord. "She carried him out like one of us," a young private murmured to his bunkmate. "She didn't even hesitate," another added. "Reminds me what we're fighting for," a third said quietly. The respect grew into something more, a collective determination that she must be honored. Not in words alone, but in the way soldiers honored their own. Plans were quietly made. At dawn, the battalion would assemble. Clara Dawson would wake not to obscurity, not to whispers of doubt, but to the unmistakable sound of boots pounding in unison. The sight of hundreds standing tall in recognition of her bravery, she would awaken to a moment she would never forget. The night passed in fragments of uneasy rest. Clara drifted in and out of shallow sleep, stirred by the hum of generators, the muffled voices of medics, and the occasional clang of metal outside the tent. Each time she opened her eyes, she saw only the dim glow of lanterns above, and the shifting shadows of soldiers moving quietly on duty by morning. The air inside the infirmary was cool and heavy with the scent of antiseptic. Clara stirred awake, blinking as the soft rays of dawn filtered through the canvas flaps. Her body felt sore, every muscle aching as if she had run a marathon. She winced as she tried to sit up, but a nurse hurried to her side, gently adjusting her pillows. "Take it easy, Miss Dawson," the nurse said kindly. "You gave us quite a scare yesterday." Clara rubbed her temples, her memories of the accident coming back in vivid flashes. The fire, the soldier's hand clutching hers, the roar of the wreck exploding behind them. Her heart tightened. The boy? The soldier? How is he? "He's stable," the nurse reassured her with a smile. "He's going to make it. You saved his life." The words warmed Clara's heart, but also unsettled her. She was glad the young man was alive, but she still could not understand why everyone seemed to treat her as though she had done something remarkable. To her, there had never been a choice. Before she could gather her thoughts, a shadow fell across the tent entrance. A soldier stepped inside, tall and sharp in uniform. His boots clicked against the ground as he saluted briefly, then said, "Miss Dawson, the colonel requests your presence outside. If you feel strong enough." Clara frowned, uncertain. "The colonel? Why? I don't, please," the soldier interrupted gently. "It's important." The nurse helped Clara to her feet. Her legs trembled as she stood, but pride stiffened her spine. She brushed her soot-stained clothes with her hands, trying to make herself look presentable, though she still looked more like a weary mother than a hero. The soldier led her through the tent flaps. Clara squinted as the early morning light flooded her eyes. And then she froze. Before her stretched an image so powerful, so unexpected. It nearly brought her to her knees. On the open training ground, An entire battalion, hundreds of soldiers, stood in perfect formation. Rows upon rows of uniforms gleamed in the morning sun, boots aligned, faces solemn and steady. Their rifles rested neatly at their sides, and the air hummed with disciplined silence. At the front stood Colonel Harris, his cap tucked under his arm, his posture rigid. And beside him, on crutches but upright, stood the young soldier Clara had saved. His face was pale, but his eyes were bright, and when he saw her, his lips curved into a faint, grateful smile. The sight overwhelmed Clara. She pressed her hand against her chest, her breath catching. What is this?" she whispered. The colonel stepped forward, his voice carrying with commanding clarity. "Miss Dawson, yesterday, you displayed a kind of courage that deserves to be recognized. You did not wear a uniform. You did not carry a weapon. Yet you ran into danger without hesitation and saved the life of one of our own." He paused, his gaze locking with hers. "Courage does not come from training alone. It comes from the heart. And yours, Miss Dawson, is the heart of a true hero." At his words, every soldier in the battalion lifted their hand to their brow in a sharp, unified salute. The sound of hundreds of arms moving in perfect unison rang like thunder in the silence. Clara's knees trembled as she looked across the sea of faces, all honoring her. A woman who had walked into fire without thinking of herself. She pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I am not a hero. I'm just Clara." The young soldier she had saved took a step forward, leaning heavily on his crutches. His voice, though faint, carried enough for her to hear. "You're the reason I'm alive. Heroes don't always wear uniforms, sometimes. Sometimes they look like you." Clara shook her head, overcome, but the colonel's firm voice interrupted again. "Heroes rarely recognize themselves. That's why it is our duty to recognize them." The soldiers held their salute, unwavering. Some faces were hard with discipline, others softened with emotion. A few recruits blinked back tears, visibly moved by the sight of their battalion honoring a civilian woman. Clara felt the weight of it press upon her heart. Never in her life had she imagined a moment like this. She thought of Ethan, of how he always teased her for being too soft. She imagined his face, if he could see her now, standing before an army that saw her as a figure of strength. Her chest tightened with humility. "I only did what I hoped someone would do for my son, if he were ever in need," she said finally, her voice shaking but resolute. "I don't deserve this, but I thank you for him, and for all of you." At her words, Colonel Harris gave a single, sharp nod. Dismiss. The salute ended in perfect harmony, but the respect lingered in every gaze. One by one, soldiers broke formation, stepping forward to shake Clara's hand, to thank her, to acknowledge what she had done. Some offered quiet words of gratitude. Others simply nodded, their eyes saying what words could not. When the young soldier reached her, his hands trembling slightly on the crutches, he pressed something small and cool into her palm, his dog tags. "Please," he said softly, "keep these, to remind you that you're not ordinary." Clara stared down at the tags in her hand, her tears falling freely. She tried to protest, but his expression was firm. She closed her fingers around the gift, her voice catching, "I'll keep them, and I'll never forget you." The battalion began to disperse, but the memory of their salute stayed etched in the air like a living echo. Clara stood, still trembling, overwhelmed by the realization that her actions had bridged to worlds the ordinary life she had always known and the extraordinary courage she never knew she possessed. For the rest of her days, whenever she remembered that morning, she would recall not the chaos of the accident nor the pain of exhaustion, but the sight of hundreds of soldiers standing tall, their hands raised in her honor. It was not medals, nor wealth, nor fame that she carried from that day. It was something far greater, the knowledge that even the most ordinary among us can rise to extraordinary heights when courage calls. And in that moment, as the morning sun rose higher over Brookhaven, Clara Dawson, waitress, mother, ordinary woman, became unforgettable. The aftermath of that morning left Clara Dawson in a strange, surreal state. She returned to her modest home in Brookhaven, her body still weary from exhaustion, her muscles sore from the relentless exertion of the rescue. Yet her mind raced with the vivid memories of the battalion, the precise and unwavering salute, the sight of hundreds of soldiers acknowledging her courage. It was a moment she could not forget, and one she never expected. Clara's neighbors watched with curiosity and quiet admiration as she walked through the streets. She noticed the respectful nods, the lingering glances, and even the whispers. News of her bravery had spread quickly, carried by soldiers who returned to base, and by civilians who learned of the story from local reporters. Yet Clara remained the same humble woman she had always been. She did not seek attention, nor did she relish it. She merely carried on, quietly, with the weight of what had transpired resting gently on her shoulders. The town's small community center organized a modest gathering in her honor. People from all corners of Brookhaven came to offer their thanks, neighbors, friends, and even some soldiers who had accompanied the young man she had saved. The space was filled with the aroma of home-cooked meals, the soft murmur of voices, and the gentle rustling of chairs as attendees settled into their seats. At the front, a podium had been set up, and Clara, reluctant but invited, stood before the crowd. Colonel Harris was there again, standing tall in his crisp uniform, his face steady but his eyes reflecting the deep respect he held for her. He spoke first, recounting the events of that fateful afternoon. He described how Clara had acted without hesitation, how she had put herself in danger when trained soldiers hesitated, and how her courage had ultimately saved a life. "When we think of heroism," he said, his voice strong and unwavering, "we often think of medals, accolades, or uniforms. But heroism is also courage in its purest form. Courage that defies fear. Courage that acts even when the outcome is uncertain." Clara Dawson, through her actions, has shown us that heroism resides in all of us. Today, we honor her. The audience erupted into applause, a thunderous wave of gratitude and admiration. Clara's cheeks flushed, and she lowered her eyes, feeling deeply uncomfortable with the attention. She did not see herself as deserving of such praise. To her, she had only acted out of instinct and compassion, qualities she believed were ordinary, available to anyone. A young soldier stepped forward, the very one she had saved. Leaning on his crutches, but standing taller in spirit than his injuries would suggest. His eyes were bright, filled with gratitude, and his voice shook slightly as he addressed her. "Ma'am," he began, "I don't know if I'll ever be able to thank you properly. You gave me a second chance at life. You didn't hesitate for even a moment. And for that, I will always be grateful. You saved me. And in doing so, you taught me what true courage looks like." He handed her a small, folded envelope. "Open this when you are alone," he said softly. A faint smile on his lips, Clara accepted the envelope with trembling hands, unsure if she wanted to face the contents immediately. She nodded to him, words failing her, then turned back to the crowd. The applause continued, echoing in the high-ceilinged hall of the community center, filling her ears with sounds that were both exhilarating and humbling. Later, when the crowd had dispersed and the room was quiet, Clara opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from the young soldier and the battalion, expressing their deepest gratitude. Alongside the letter were two small items: a set of dog tags, polished and engraved, and a small medallion bearing the insignia of the battalion. The words in the letter were simple, yet profound. You acted when courage was required, when fear might have stopped others. You are a hero in the truest sense, and we will never forget the life you saved. These tokens are a small symbol of our gratitude and our respect." Clara held the items close to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She could hardly believe it. She had always lived her life quietly, focusing on her son, her work, and helping where she could. She had never imagined that a single act, born out of instinct and kindness, could ripple outward to touch so many lives. The days that followed were filled with letters, calls, and visitors, each expressing gratitude or admiration for her bravery. Local news outlets covered her story, but Clara never sought the spotlight. She spoke briefly to reporters, careful to highlight the young soldier she had saved and the teamwork of those who assisted, rather than dwelling on her own actions. Yet, despite her humility, the recognition brought a profound shift in her life. Invitations to speak at schools, community centers, and local organizations poured in. Clara initially hesitated, unsure how an ordinary woman like herself could inspire others. But she eventually embraced these opportunities, sharing not just the story of her bravery, but the lessons she had learned: that courage is not reserved for the mighty or the trained, that acts of kindness can transform lives, and that ordinary people can perform extraordinary deeds when they act selflessly. Ethan watched his mother with awe. He had always admired her, but seeing her recognized in this way deepened his respect and pride. "Mom," he said one afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, "you really are a hero. Not just because of what you did, but because of who you are." Clara smiled, brushing his hair from his face. "I'm still your mom, Ethan," she replied softly. "But yes, sometimes even ordinary people are called to do something extraordinary." The young soldier remained a constant presence in her life. Over time, he visited Clara and Ethan, sharing stories of his recovery and his experiences in the battalion. Their bond grew, built on mutual respect, gratitude, and a shared understanding of the fragility and value of life. Clara kept the dog tags and medallion displayed carefully in her home, not as trophies, but as reminders of the day her life had intersected with courage in a way she had never imagined. Each time she looked at them, she remembered the faces of the soldiers, the disciplined precision of the salute, and the realization that ordinary people can rise to extraordinary heights when they act with a full heart. And though her life returned to its familiar routines, serving at the diner, caring for Ethan, helping her neighbors, Clara Dawson was forever changed. She had glimpsed a world where her actions mattered beyond her immediate circle, where bravery and compassion could inspire not only gratitude but reverence. The honor was not in the applause, the letters, or even the medallion. The honor was in the knowledge that she had faced fear, acted selflessly, and saved a life. That knowledge remained with her, steady and luminous, a quiet flame of confidence and humility that would guide her through the rest of her days. She had never sought recognition, and she never desired fame. Yet, in the honor bestowed upon her, she found a profound truth: courage, when unselfishly given, creates ripples that reach far beyond the moment of action. One act of bravery could transform lives, not just the life saved, but the life of the one who acts, and the lives of everyone who witnesses it. And so, Clara Dawson, the ordinary woman who had acted with extraordinary heart, carried her honor with grace. She remained humble, devoted to her son and her community. But the world now recognized what she had always known in her quiet heart. Courage is measured not by rank or title, but by the willingness to act when it matters most. The days turned into weeks, and the story of Clara Dawson's extraordinary courage settled into the hearts of those around her. Though she returned to her routine life in Brookhaven, nothing felt entirely the same. Every interaction, every smile, and every small gesture seemed to carry new meaning. Clara now understood, in a way she had never before realized, the ripple effect a single act of bravery could have, not just on the lives of others, but on her own as well. At the diner, customers greeted her differently. They still came for the meals and coffee, but many stopped to shake her hand or exchange a few words of admiration. Clara would smile politely, deflecting compliments, insisting that anyone else would have done the same. Yet in quiet moments, she felt a subtle shift within herself, a newfound confidence, a recognition of her own strength, and the knowledge that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things. Her son, Ethan, watched her transformation with awe. He had always admired his mother, but now he saw her in a different light. "Mom," he said one evening as they walked home from school, "you really are a hero. I mean it. Not because of what everyone says, but because of what you did." Clara knelt to meet his gaze, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Ethan, I just did what felt right," she said softly. "You'll see. When you act out of kindness and courage, it changes more than one life. It changes everything around you." Her words, simple as they were, carried a weight that would shape Ethan for years to come. He understood that heroism was not about medals or recognition, but about choices, about acting when it mattered most. The military continued to honor her. Invitations arrived from training academies, local organizations, and veteran groups. Each requested her presence to speak about courage, compassion, and the impact of selfless action. Clara accepted selectively, preferring smaller, more personal gatherings where she could truly connect with people rather than grand ceremonies that highlighted her as an individual. During these visits, Clara shared the story of that fateful day, always emphasizing the importance of humility. She spoke about fear, the instinct that had driven her to act despite the danger, and the overwhelming exhaustion that followed. She encouraged audiences to understand that courage is not about perfection, skill, or preparation. It is about heart, integrity, and the willingness to put others before oneself. She became a quiet inspiration, a living example that ordinary people could rise to extraordinary circumstances. Her presence reminded soldiers, students, and civilians alike that heroism could emerge in the most unexpected forms. One day, a letter arrived from the battalion. It was a formal commendation, an acknowledgement of her bravery and selflessness. Clara read it carefully, holding back tears as she absorbed the words. The letter concluded with a sentiment she would carry with her forever. Your courage reminds us that the line between ordinary and extraordinary is drawn by the choices we make when it matters most. Thank you for showing us the heart of a hero. Clara placed the letter on a small shelf beside the dog tags and medallion from the young soldier she had saved. Together, they formed a quiet shrine to a day that had changed her life, and the lives of everyone who witnessed it. Her relationship with the soldier deepened over time. Though he recovered physically, his spirit had been profoundly affected by her actions. They corresponded regularly, sharing updates, stories, and reflections on courage, life, and gratitude. Clara introduced him to Ethan, who quickly became attached to the young man. Over shared meals, laughter, and long conversations, the bond between the three grew stronger. The soldier, once a stranger, became a friend, a mentor, and an enduring reminder of the power of one selfless act. Clara's influence expanded beyond her immediate community. Schools invited her to speak to students about character, ethics, and bravery. Local organizations sought her guidance in volunteer efforts, seeing in her a model for compassion in action. Her story inspired letters from strangers, some expressing gratitude for her example, others sharing personal experiences of courage inspired by her actions. Through it all, Clara remained humble. She never sought fame, never reveled in recognition. Her focus remained on what she could do to make a difference, on nurturing Ethan, and on helping those in need. Yet she could not deny the transformation within herself. She carried a quiet confidence, a certainty that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. One afternoon, Clara visited the site of the accident. The overturned vehicle had long been removed, replaced by a stretch of grass and wildflowers. She knelt and touched the ground where the young soldier had been trapped, her hand resting lightly on the earth. I never expected to be remembered for this, she whispered, her voice carrying softly in the breeze. I only did what I had to do. But I hope it inspires someone else to act when they see someone in need. Nearby, a few soldiers were conducting routine training exercises. When they noticed her, they paused, saluted, and smiled. Clara returned the salute with a small, heartfelt nod. It was a simple gesture, but one that symbolized the bridge she had built between ordinary civilians and those who served in uniform. Back home, life gradually returned to a comfortable rhythm. Clara continued her work at the diner, attended community events, and nurtured Ethan's growth and education. But she also carried the lessons of her experience into every aspect of her life. She approached challenges with calm assurance, faced fears with thoughtful determination, and embraced opportunities to help others without hesitation. Her legacy began to take root in the community. Inspired by her courage, local residents became more involved in volunteer efforts, aiding neighbors, supporting veterans, and extending kindness in ways they might never have considered before. Clara's story became a living testament to the idea that one act of bravery, no matter how small it seemed at the time, could ignite change far beyond the initial moment. Years later, when Ethan grew into a young man, he often spoke of his mother with reverence. "Mom," he said one evening, "you didn't just save a life that day. You saved me, too. You showed me what it means to be brave, to care, and to act without waiting for recognition." Clara smiled, brushing back his hair. "I only did what felt right," she replied softly. "But if my actions can teach you and others to be kind and courageous, then that is a reward far greater than anything I could have imagined." In the quiet moments of reflection, Clara Dawson realized the truth she had discovered on that extraordinary day. Heroism is not measured by medals, salutes, or accolades. It is measured by the willingness to act when it matters most, by the courage to face fear, and by the compassion that drives us to protect, help, and uplift others. The young soldiers she had saved, the battalion that saluted her, and the community that celebrated her courage were all part of a legacy that would continue to grow. And though she remained humble, she carried within her a quiet, steadfast knowledge that one ordinary woman, acting with extraordinary heart, could change the course of many lives. Clara Dawson had discovered her strength, and in doing so, she had illuminated a path for others to follow. A path of courage, kindness, and enduring impact. Months passed since that fateful day, yet the image of the battalion standing at attention never left Clara Dawson's mind. She carried it with her everywhere, an indelible memory of courage, humility, and human connection. Even in her quiet moments at home, washing dishes, tending to Ethan's homework, or walking along the tree-lined streets of Brookhaven, the memory hovered in her thoughts like a guiding light. Despite the attention she had received, Clara continued her life much as it had been before. She worked at the diner, greeted neighbors with warmth, and taught Ethan the values of kindness and bravery. But there was a subtle shift in how she saw the world, a deeper awareness of the fragility of life, a newfound appreciation for the small acts of heroism that often go unnoticed, and a quiet confidence that she could rise to any challenge that presented itself. One sunny afternoon, Clara received a knock at the door. Standing there was the young soldier she had saved, now fully recovered. His uniform was immaculate, and his posture was strong. But the soft smile on his face betrayed a hint of the boy she remembered from the day of the accident. "Hi, ma'am," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "I thought I'd come by, just to check on you." And Ethan, of course. Ethan ran to the door, throwing himself into the soldier's embrace. "You're okay," he exclaimed. "Mom keeps talking about you all the time." Clara laughed softly, feeling warmth bloom in her chest. "It's good to see you again," she said, shaking his hand. "You've come a long way." He nodded, his eyes serious now. "I owe everything to you. I can't put into words how much you changed my life that day. And not just me, everyone around us. You've shown me, and all the soldiers, what courage really means." They sat together on the porch, reminiscing quietly. The young soldier spoke of how the battalion often referred to Clara's actions during training sessions as an example of real courage. They spoke of honor, loyalty, and the rare courage of civilians who risked themselves for others. His words were humbling, even to Clara, who had never considered herself capable of such heroism. "You don't understand," she said softly. "I only did what anyone would do. I didn't think about medals or recognition. I just saw someone in danger and couldn't walk away." He smiled, shaking his head. "That's exactly why it mattered so much. Most people wouldn't have acted, but you did. And now, because of you, we all have a standard to measure ourselves by, not in skill, but in heart. You set an example none of us will ever forget." The young soldier reached into his pocket and handed Clara a small, polished wooden box. Inside lay a folded flag and a plaque engraved with the words, "For Clara Dawson, whose courage and selflessness embody the highest ideals of humanity. Your bravery reminds us that heroes come in all forms, and that ordinary people can perform extraordinary acts. With gratitude, the men and women of the battalion." Clara's hands trembled as she accepted the gift. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she held the plaque close. She could not speak, not because she lacked words, but because words were insufficient to express the depth of her emotions. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully feel the magnitude of what she had done, the lives she had touched, and the enduring impact of her actions. Ethan stood silently beside her, looking up at his mother with admiration and awe. "Mom," he whispered, "you're my hero, and now, everyone else knows it too." Clara smiled, her heart swelling with love and humility. "We all have our moments, Ethan. Today was mine. But every one of us has the chance to rise to something greater when it's needed." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Clara walked through her neighborhood. Neighbors waved and smiled, some approaching to express their gratitude or simply to acknowledge her presence. Children who had heard the story of her bravery approached her with wide eyes, asking questions, hoping to understand how an ordinary woman could perform such extraordinary feats. Clara knelt to meet their gaze, her voice soft but firm. "Courage doesn't mean you're not afraid," she told them. "It means that even when you are afraid, you do what is right. You help others, you protect those in need, and you act with your whole heart. That is true bravery." Her words left a lasting impression on those who heard them, inspiring a new generation to understand that heroism is not confined to soldiers, officers, or the powerful. It exists in every person who chooses kindness, compassion, and courage over fear and indifference. In the weeks and months that followed, Clara's life continued with its familiar rhythms, yet she was forever changed. She remained devoted to Ethan, teaching him not just academic lessons but the principles of empathy, courage, and selflessness. She continued her volunteer work, helping those in need, reaching out to neighbors, and sharing her story quietly with those who could learn from it. The young soldier maintained a steady presence in her life. Their bond had grown beyond gratitude into a deep, enduring friendship. He often visited, sharing stories of his experiences in the military, the lives he had touched, and the values he upheld because of the example Clara had set. Through these interactions, Clara realized something profound. The heroism she had exhibited that day had created a ripple effect. The young soldier she saved went on to act with even greater courage and integrity, influenced by her example. The battalion, inspired by her actions, carried her story as a standard of virtue and bravery. And the people in her community, hearing and sharing her story, learned that courage and kindness could indeed shape the world around them. Years later, when Ethan was grown and starting his own journey into adulthood, he would often reflect on his mother's example. "Mom," he said once, "you taught me everything I need to know about courage and kindness. Not just through what you said, but by what you did." Clara smiled, embracing him gently. "Ethan, life will always present you with moments where courage is required. You will have the chance to help others, to protect, and to act selflessly. Never forget that even ordinary people have extraordinary strength within them. That strength will guide you, as it guided me." And so, the legacy of Clara Dawson endured not in headlines, awards, or fleeting fame, but in the hearts and minds of those she touched. The battalion remembered her bravery. The young soldier carried her lessons into every action he took. Her community continued to draw inspiration from her example. And Clara herself lived with a quiet pride, knowing that, in a single, selfless act, she had changed not just one life, but many, including her own. Her ordinary life had intersected with extraordinary circumstances, and she had risen to meet the challenge with courage, heart, and humility. In the end, Clara Dawson's story was not merely one of survival or recognition. It was a testament to the transformative power of bravery, the enduring impact of compassion, and the extraordinary potential hidden within ordinary people. And as the sun set over Brookhaven each day, casting golden light over the streets she walked, Clara knew that she had fulfilled something far greater than herself. She had proven that, when ordinary hearts act with extraordinary courage, the world around them is forever changed.